The English Premier League is the most popular league in the world, every season watched by billions of fans from every corner of the globe. Dominated by the so-called Big Six, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester United and Manchester City, the last of which has won the title 4 times in a row. However, the Premier League could have looked very different if it weren't for a dark event in football history. A little-known terrorist attack over 100 years ago set off a chain reaction of events that changed English football forever, and the effects of which can still be seen today. This is the story of the terrorist attack that shaped the Premier League. Arsenal are one of the biggest clubs in England. One of the so-called Big Six clubs, they have been an ever-present in the Premier League and make regular appearances in the Champions League. Playing from their current stadium in Ashburton Grove in North London, they have a rivalry with all the other London clubs, but none more so than their nearby North London neighbours, Tottenham Hotspur, who play in their new stadium just a few miles away. Arsenal moved to Ashburton Grove, more commonly known as the Emirates, in 2006 from their original ground in Highbury, which has since been demolished and redeveloped into a residential area. Long-time fans of Arsenal will know that they have not always been a North London club, but actually have their origins south of the river, in Plumstead, and started their football life known as Dial Square, and then a few years later as Woolwich Arsenal. However, what is a little-known part of their history is the reason that they had to move to North London, and what happened to their old stadium. Arsenal was founded in 1886 as Dial Square, later known as Woolwich Arsenal, when registered with the Football League in 1893. Playing at the Manor Ground in Plumstead, the club was not successful due to low attendances and low income, and was pushed towards the verge of bankruptcy. Sir Henry Norris, a wealthy businessman who was heavily involved in another London club, Fulham, stepped in to save the club in 1910 and paid off the club's debts. A Victorian version of Roman Abramovich, Norris's original plan was to merge Arsenal and Fulham into one club, but this was blocked by the Football League. Norris was now aware that he needed to move to give the club a chance to have a future. Plumstead was too sparsely populated to give the club decent attendances, and he wanted to move to a more affluent, unpopulated area to boost his ticket sales. However, Woolwich Arsenal fans were resistant, and he ended up ditching the plans. And then something happened that changed everything. At around the turn of the century, there was a serious social problem within Britain. Women were denied the opportunity to vote in elections, and they wanted this to change. The suffragette movement became very active in society, and they were creating problems for the establishment with protests and marches. Women were still denied the right to vote in elections, and despite decades of protests, were not moving any closer to achieving their goal. Within the suffragette movement, there was a militant group who had decided that more direct action was needed, as protests and marches were not having any effect. The militant group started a bombing and arson campaign that carried on from 1912 and ended at the start of the First World War in 1914. Improvised explosive devices, letter bombs and assassination attempts on political targets led to the deaths of at least 4 people, and scores were injured. Apart from political figures, a particular target for the violent women were sporting institutions, seen as a male-dominated industry. Several golf courses around the country, along with the All England Tennis Club at Wimbledon, were the target of arson attacks, as was Crystal Palace Ground at Selhurst Park and Blackburn Rovers' home Ewood Park. The suffragettes also turned their attention to Manor Ground in Plumstead, where Arsenal played, and on the 30th of September 1913 launched an arson attack that burned the main stadium to ashes. When faced with the loss of his football ground and reluctant to pay for the rebuilding of a stadium in an area that he didn't want to be in anyway, Norris seized this opportunity to move the entire club to North London, despite the protests of some Woolwich fans and some local residents in Highbury when the new stadium would be situated. The club moved to Highbury in 1913, changed its name from Woolwich Arsenal to just the Arsenal, and in the process upset Tottenham fans who felt that the club was intruding on its area. This rivalry would only deepen once Arsenal replaced Tottenham in the old First Division at the end of the First World War. Attendances at the new ground were double that of the ground at Plumstead, and Arsenal would become one of the dominant clubs in English football. The tensions between the Arsenal and Tottenham fans still remain, and the North London derby is one of the most intense games in world football. Next time you're watching Arsenal vs Spurs and are shouting at the TV, or if you're at the game, shouting at the ref, pause and give thought to the suffragettes who made this game possible. Without their terrorist attack, this rivalry wouldn't exist and Arsenal wouldn't be the club they are today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe and check out the other videos on the Offbeat London channel.